The animal shelter volunteer gave me a tired, grateful smile as she hauled the last black trash bag out of my trunk. My sister, Ashley, stood frozen on the sidewalk, her perfectly curated Instagram face crumbling into a mask of pure, ugly rage. Her mouth opened and closed, but for a moment, no sound came out. She was staring at the mountain of designer clothes, limited edition handbags, and ridiculously expensive shoes piled up next to the shelter's donation bin. Her entire wardrobe. Her entire identity. When she finally found her voice, it was a shriek that made the dogs inside start barking. "What did you do? What in the hell did you do?" I just stared back at her, my heart beating a calm, steady rhythm. She was screaming about her $1,000 dresses, but all I could think about was the $20 dog bed she threw in the trash. You might be wondering what kind of person donates their own sister's clothes to an animal shelter. To understand why her prized possessions were about to be sold off to buy kibble and flea collars, you have to understand what she took from me first, something that could never be replaced. His name was Buster, and he was my dog. But he was so much more than that. In a family where I was the scapegoat and Ashley was the golden child, Buster was my only ally. I found him during my junior year of high school, a scrawny, terrified mutt abandoned in a park. I used my savings from my after-school job to pay for his vet checkup and his first bag of food. From that day on, he was my shadow. He was the warm weight at the foot of my bed, the happy tail that greeted me at the door, the only living thing in that house who looked at me with pure, unconditional love. My parents tolerated him, barely. But Ashley hated him. She called him a filthy mutt and complained that he looked at her funny. She would accidentally step on his tail or spill things near his bed. I protected him fiercely, counting down the days until I could afford to move out and take him with me, away from her, away from all of them. I was working 2 jobs to save for a deposit on an apartment. I was so close. I just needed a little more time. My parents fueled Ashley's sense of entitlement. They were a textbook case of enabling a golden child while emotionally neglecting the scapegoat. When Ashley scraped by her first year of college with a C average, they bought her a brand new convertible to motivate her. When I made the dean's list for the 3rd semester in a row while working 2 jobs, my father sat me down and gave me a stern lecture about priorities, warning me that my jobs were distracting me from my real responsibilities. To them, my success was an expectation, while Ashley's mediocrity was an achievement worth rewarding. I was the family mule, expected to carry my own weight and theirs too. Ashley was the family princess, who couldn't be burdened with the slightest inconvenience. This dynamic is why I was so terrified to leave Buster behind, even for a weekend. I was part of a competitive scholarship program that required me to attend a 3-day academic retreat out of state. It was mandatory. Missing it would mean losing the scholarship that was paying for my entire education. I had no choice. I spent the day before I left preparing everything for Buster. I pre-portioned his meals into little Ziploc bags. I wrote down the vet's number and taped it to the fridge. I wrote a 3-page-long instruction manual covering his walk schedule, his favorite toys, and his funny little quirks. The last thing I did before I left was beg my mother to make sure the back gate was always latched. Ashley had a habit of leaving it wide open after sunbathing in the yard. "Please, Mom, just check it. She always forgets." My mother had sighed, that long, suffering sigh she reserved just for me. "For heaven's sake, it's a dog, not a Fabergé egg. He'll be fine. Stop being so dramatic." That entire weekend, a cold knot of dread sat in my stomach. I couldn't focus on the lectures. I kept checking my phone, my heart jumping every time it buzzed. I texted my mom twice a day to ask about Buster. Her replies were always short and dismissive. "He's fine. Stop worrying." On the final day, just as I was packing my bag to head for the bus station, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice wasn't sad or panicked. It was irritated. "I have some bad news," she said, as if she were telling me the milk had gone sour. "There was an accident with Buster. He got out of the yard last night." I stood there in the hallway of my dorm, the phone pressed hard against my ear. He got out last night, my mother repeated, her voice flat. The neighbor said he ran right into the road. A car hit him. It was very quick. Don't worry, your father already took care of it. There was nothing anyone could do. Took care of it. She said it like she was talking about a broken appliance. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just reported the facts, annoyed that her Sunday had been disturbed by the inconvenience of my dog's death. I don't remember hanging up. The bus ride home was a 5-hour silent scream. I stared out the window, but I didn't see the passing trees or the other cars. I just saw Buster. I saw him as a puppy, tripping over his own feet. I saw him curled up on my lap while I studied. I saw his head pop up every time he heard the crinkle of a snack bag. Tears streamed down my face, but I made no sound. The scholarship I had just secured felt like a curse. My education, my future, everything I was working for felt like ash in my mouth. It had cost me Buster. When I finally walked through the front door of my house, the silence was the most violent sound I'd ever heard. The TV was on. My parents were on the couch, watching some game show. Ashley was lounging in an armchair, scrolling through her phone, a bored expression on her face. No one looked up when I came in. It was as if I had just come back from the grocery store, not from a weekend that had ended with my world being ripped apart. I dropped my bag on the floor. "What happened?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. My father grunted, his eyes still glued to the TV. "Your mother told you. It was an accident." I turned my gaze to Ashley. "You left the gate open, didn't you?" She finally looked up from her phone, her eyes rolling in theatrical annoyance. "Oh my God, are you going to be this dramatic all night? It was a stupid dog, and it was an accident. It's not my fault he was dumb enough to run into traffic. Grow up." I didn't have the energy to fight. I felt hollowed out. Empty. I turned and walked to my bedroom, craving the small comfort of holding his favorite squeaky toy or burying my face in his little bed. But when I got to my room, his bed wasn't there. His water bowl was gone. I looked in the closet where I kept his things. The toy basket was empty. His leash wasn't on its hook. Everything was gone. It was as if he had been erased. I walked back into the living room, my body feeling strangely light, as if the grief had burned everything else inside me away. "Where are his things?" I asked again, my voice devoid of emotion. His bed was in my room. His toys were in the closet. Where are they? My mother let out another one of her long-suffering sighs. "I told you, I cleaned up. I threw all that clutter out. I was trying to do you a favor, to help you move on." But then Ashley laughed. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound. She looked up from her phone, a smug little smile playing on her lips. "She didn't throw it out," Ashley said, her eyes glinting with a special kind of malice she reserved just for me. "I sold it." I just stared at her, not comprehending. She must have enjoyed the look on my face, because she continued, her voice dripping with condescension. "I found this group online, a forum for grieving pet parents. It's pathetic. They'll buy anything if you call it a memorial item. I sold his leash, his collar, that stupid squeaky hedgehog, even that filthy bed he slept in. Made almost $200. The air left my lungs. "Why?" The word was barely a whisper. "Why would you do that?" Ashley scoffed as if I'd asked the stupidest question in the world. "For the money, obviously. I wanted the new limited edition Fenty Kilowatt highlighter. It was sold out everywhere." She looked me up and down. "It's not like you need makeup anyway." I turned to my parents, my last shred of hope begging for them to show an ounce of humanity, to say something, to condemn her. But my father just shook his head. "The subject is closed," my mother added. "Honestly, what's the difference? It's gone either way. At least this way it didn't go to waste." That was it. That was the moment. It felt like a switch being flipped in my soul. The overwhelming, crushing sadness that had been drowning me receded, and in its place, something cold and hard and sharp began to form. They hadn't just accidentally killed my dog. They had desecrated his memory. They had taken my grief and sold it for makeup. In their eyes, my deepest love and my deepest pain were worth less than a bit of sparkly powder. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just turned, walked back to my room, and quietly closed the door. The time for tears was over. Now, it was time to plan. For the next 3 weeks, I became a ghost in my own home. My family, in their self-absorbed way, mistook my silence for submission. They thought I was finally getting over it. I stopped arguing. I stopped pleading for them to understand. When my mother would make a passive-aggressive comment, I would simply nod. When my father would give me orders, I'd say, "Okay." When Ashley would flaunt a new purchase, I would look right through her. My silence made them uneasy, but they were too lazy to question it. They preferred the quiet. They didn't realize that I wasn't grieving anymore. I was studying. I watched Ashley like a scientist studying a particularly venomous insect. I learned her schedule. I noted which days she had late classes and which nights she stayed over at her friends' houses. But most importantly, I studied what she loved. And what Ashley loved, more than our parents, more than her friends, more than herself, was her stuff. Her bedroom wasn't a room. It was a showroom. She had a walk-in closet that was bigger than my entire bedroom, meticulously organized by brand, season, and color. It was a temple dedicated to vanity. She would spend hours in there, trying on outfits, taking selfies, curating the image of the perfect, popular, wealthy girl she projected to the world. Her clothes, her shoes, her bags, they weren't just possessions. They were her entire identity. Without them, she was nothing. And that was her weakness. The idea for my revenge came to me not in a flash of anger, but in a moment of quiet clarity. I was driving home from one of my jobs and saw a sign outside the Paws and Claws shelter, the biggest no-kill shelter in the county. It was a plea for donations. "Your old blankets, towels, and household goods can keep our animals warm." I thought of Buster, shivering in the park before I found him. Then I thought of Ashley, bragging about how she sold his bed for cash. An idea, so simple and so perfectly just, bloomed in my mind. She had converted the memory of my love into materialistic trash. I would convert her materialistic trash into love. I would take the shallow objects she used to define her worth and transform them into something that had actual worth. A second chance for animals who had been thrown away, just like Buster. The plan settled over me, not with the heat of rage, but with the cold, calm certainty of a debt coming due. It wasn't just about destroying her closet. It was about creating something good from the wreckage of her cruelty. It was the only tribute that felt fitting for the dog who had saved my life, just by loving me. The perfect opportunity arrived like a gift from the universe. Ashley announced she was going on a long weekend trip to a music festival with her friends. Our parents, naturally, were funding the entire thing, the tickets, the hotel, the shopping money, as a reward for her simply existing. She would be gone from Friday morning until Monday evening. It was more than enough time. That Thursday, after my shift at the library, I went to a hardware store. I walked to the aisle with the trash bags and picked out the biggest, thickest, heavy-duty contractor bags they sold. I bought 4 boxes of them, a total of 100 bags. The man at the checkout counter gave me a weird look, but I just paid in cash and walked out, my expression unreadable. I waited until Friday night. My parents had gone out for their weekly dinner and a movie. The house was finally, blissfully quiet. I walked up the stairs and into Ashley's room. The air smelled cloyingly sweet from her perfume. I opened her walk-in closet, and for a moment, I just looked. It was an altar to consumerism. Racks were crammed so tight with clothes you couldn't see the wall behind them. Many still had the price tags on. Shelves overflowed with designer shoes. Handbags were perched on high shelves like idols. It was a monument to waste, built by my parents' money and my sister's vanity. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel glee. I felt nothing but a quiet, clear purpose. I started on the left and worked my way right. I didn't pause. I didn't second guess. I was an automaton of justice. I pulled armfuls of dresses, blouses, and jackets off their hangers, the plastic and velvet hangers clattering to the floor. I let them fall. I stuffed the clothes medically into the black bags. Silk, cashmere, leather, denim. It all went in. Then I moved to the shoes, sweeping them off the shelves into the bags. The expensive sneakers she wore once, the stilettos she couldn't even walk in. Then came the purses. I saw the ridiculously small, glittery handbag she had bought with the money she got from selling Buster's things. I picked it up. It felt cheap and hollow in my hand. For a single second, I saw her smug face in my mind. Then I dropped it into a bag without ceremony. It was just another piece of trash. 2 hours later, I was done. The closet was a barren cave. The only things left were empty hangers strewn across the carpet. I tied the top of the final bag, the 16th one, and dragged it out to join the others I had lined up in the garage, ready for my trip to the shelter in the morning. The next morning, I was up before the sun. It took me 2 trips to load all 16 bags into my beat-up sedan. The car's suspension groaned under the weight. I drove across town to the Paws and Claws shelter, the windows down, the cool morning air feeling clean and new. When I pulled up, a young volunteer's jaw dropped when she saw the mountain of black bags I began to unload. "Is this all for donation?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Yes," I said calmly. "It's high-end women's clothing, shoes and handbags. I want it all to be sold in your thrift store. Use the money for vet bills, food, spay, and neuter programs. Whatever you need most." Her face lit up. She called over the shelter director, a woman named Carol with kind eyes and weary lines etched around them. Carol looked into one of the bags, pulled out a jacket with a $600 price tag still attached, and then looked at me, completely stunned. "Young lady," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "a donation of this quality. This will fund our critical medical care fund for months. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." As I was leaving, I glanced through a window into the kennel area. I saw a volunteer patiently coaxing a terrified, scruffy-looking terrier out of his cage for a walk. He looked a lot like Buster did the day I found him. A sharp pang of grief hit me. But for the first time, it wasn't followed by despair. It was followed by a feeling of profound peace. This was for him. His memory wasn't a glittery handbag. It was a warm bed for a scared dog. It was a life saved. I drove home. The weekend passed in a state of suspended animation. My parents came home Saturday night, full of complaints about the slow service at the restaurant. They never set foot in Ashley's room. They never noticed the empty space in the garage where the bags had been. They existed in their own tiny bubble of self-interest, oblivious to the world around them. I stayed in my room, did my homework, and waited. The quiet in the house was a tightly coiled spring. On Monday afternoon, I was sitting at my desk when I heard the sound I'd been waiting for, the obnoxious rumble of Ashley's convertible pulling into the driveway. I heard the car door slam, the front door open, and her cheerful humming as she stomped up the stairs. She sounded happy, rested, and utterly unaware that her entire world was about to be reduced to a pile of empty hangers. I heard her footsteps go into her room, followed by the thud of her weekend bag hitting the floor. For about 10 seconds, there was silence. I held my breath. Then came a confused, questioning, "What?" It was quiet, but laced with a dawning horror. The silence stretched for another 3 seconds, and then it was shattered by a scream. It wasn't just a yell, it was a raw, primal shriek of utter disbelief and fury that echoed through the entire house. Her door was thrown open with such force that it slammed against the wall. She stormed into the hallway, her face pale, her eyes wild. "Where is it? Where is all my stuff?" she bellowed, her manicured hands clenched into fists. I was already standing in my own doorway, waiting for her. "I donated it," I said. My voice was calm, almost conversational. The lack of emotion in my tone seemed to enrage her more than anything else could have. "You what?" Her screams brought my parents running up the stairs, their faces clouded with alarm. "What on earth is going on?" my father demanded. Ashley pointed a trembling finger at me, tears of rage now streaming down her face, ruining her expensive mascara. "She took everything! She stole all of my clothes!" My parents turned to me, their expressions shifting from alarm to accusation. "What have you done?" my mother gasped, clutching her chest. I looked at their three faces, a united front of indignation, and I felt nothing but a cold, clean emptiness. "I gave it to the Paws and Claws Animal Shelter," I said, spelling it out as if for a child. "Ashley sold Buster's bed, his collar, and his toys for about $200. She traded his memory for makeup. So I decided to make a similar trade. I took her things, which she valued so much, and gave them to a place that will use them to save animals like him. The director told me the sale of her wardrobe will probably fund their emergency medical needs for the next half a year. An eye for an eye." They stared at me, completely blank. The logic was utterly beyond them. "Are you out of your mind?" my father finally roared. "We spent thousands of dollars on those clothes." "You are a monster!" my mother cried. "How could you do this to your sister?" Ashley was just a blubbering mess, choking out the names of designers like they were dead relatives. I realized in that moment that they would never, ever understand. To them, a dog's life and a daughter's profound grief were intangible, worthless. But a closet full of fabric had a price tag. "I'm not a monster," I said softly, turning back toward my room. "I just learned what's truly valuable." I walked past them, grabbed the 2 suitcases I had packed that morning, and headed for the stairs. They were all still standing there, stunned into silence for a brief second. I walked out the front door without looking back, leaving them alone in the echoing silence of their hollow house.